Judge Grayson assumed he was about to sentence just another naive teenager. But then the defendant started tearing apart the case like a seasoned legal veteran. The air in the Los Angeles County Courthouse was thick, almost stifling. Spectators packed the gallery, their hushed murmurs filling the space as the drama unfolded. The defense table seemed oversized for the young man standing beside it, hands casually tucked into his pockets, chin subtly raised. A silent declaration of fearlessness. This was Jalen Dawson, 19, facing charges of grand theft auto and resisting arrest. The charges were serious, yet the way Judge Walter Grayson eyed him made it clear the real trial wasn't about the law at all. Grayson leaned back, his fingers idly drumming against the gleaming wood of his desk. He peered down at Jalen over his glasses, his lips curving into a cynical smirk. "You fancy yourself a legal prodigy, do you?" His voice dripped with dry amusement. "This isn't a debate club, kid." A few scattered chuckles rippled through the courtroom. The bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor, they all seemed to be in on the joke. Jalen didn't flinch. He wasn't laughing. He had spent years preparing for this exact kind of moment, though not necessarily as a defendant. He knew courtrooms intimately. While other kids memorized basketball stats, he devoured case law. While his friends played video games, he conducted imaginary mock trials in his head, arguing hypothetical cases against himself. His mother, Denise Dawson, a paralegal for over 2 decades, had brought home countless stories of courtroom realities. Prosecutors bending rules, judges playing favorites, defense attorneys barely putting up a fight. Jalen absorbed it all. By 14 he could dissect a trial with more insight than most law students. But to Grayson none of that mattered. Jalen was just another troubled youth. "Let's get this over with," the judge sighed, flipping open the case file. "I've got a golf game at 2. The audience chuckled again, but this time something shifted. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched Jalen's lips. Grayson had just made his first blunder, and the courtroom hadn't even noticed. The prosecution's opening salvo, Prosecutor Mitchell Carrington rose from his seat, exuding the confidence of a man who'd already claimed victory. His suit was impeccable, his tie perfectly knotted, and his voice carried the practiced assurance of someone who had delivered this exact speech 100 times before. "Your Honor, the state will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Jalen Dawson, was apprehended red-handed in a stolen vehicle, a 2022 Audi A6, reported missing mere hours before his arrest. Officers pursued him through downtown, where he allegedly attempted to evade capture before being apprehended. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. The prosecution submits that the evidence speaks for itself." His words landed with undeniable weight. The gallery murmured, shifting restlessly. On the surface it sounded damning. A stolen car, a chase, a capture. Judge Grayson glanced at Jalen over his glasses, then returned his gaze to Carrington. "Proceed." The prosecutor strode toward the jury box, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. "The defense may attempt to convince you that this was all a misunderstanding, that Mr. Dawson is an unfortunate victim of circumstance." He turned, his gaze locking with Jalen's for the first time. "But let's be honest, what kind of victim flees from the police?" The tension in the room thickened. Judge Grayson leaned forward, chin resting on his hand. Jalen didn't blink. Carrington continued, sifting through a stack of papers. "Your Honor, I present the testimony of Officer Daniel Ruiz, who personally witnessed the defendant behind the wheel before he attempted to flee. The car was confirmed stolen. The arrest was made by the book." Grayson exhaled, nodding. "Sounds straightforward to me." And for most in the room it did. The case seemed clear-cut. A stolen car, a pursuit, an arrest. But Jalen, having spent years dissecting trials, saw the fissures. Still he remained silent, observing, waiting. A shocking twist. Judge Grayson tapped his gavel lightly. "All right, let's hear the defense's response." He turned to Jalen's lawyer, Lisa Thornton, a public defender who had barely uttered a word since entering the courtroom. She stood, fidgeting nervously. "Your Honor, my client." Jalen subtly placed a hand on her arm, a silent request. She hesitated, then sat back down. And for the first time Jalen spoke. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." The room fell completely silent. Grayson stared, clearly amused. "You'll what?" Jalen's voice was calm, steady. "I'll be defending myself." A ripple of murmuring spread through the courtroom. The bailiff's eyebrows shot up. Carrington's smirk faltered for a fleeting second before he let out a sharp laugh. This should be interesting. But no one was laughing when Jalen took his first step forward. Everything was about to change. Dismantling the evidence, the weight of the courtroom settled around Jalen as he adjusted his stance, hands still in his pockets. He let the silence linger just long enough to create discomfort. Then he finally spoke. Your Honor, before I begin, I'd like to confirm something with the prosecution. Carrington raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. Go ahead. Jalen took a slow step forward. You stated Officer Daniel Ruiz personally observed me behind the wheel before my arrest, correct? Carrington exhaled sharply, already bored. That's right. And that testimony is in his report. Of course it is. Jalen nodded, then turned to Judge Grayson. Your Honor, I move to dismiss that testimony as evidence. Grayson squinted at him. On what grounds? Jalen pulled his hands from his pockets for the first time, gesturing toward the prosecution's table. Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the chase began. A flicker of confusion crossed Carrington's face. What are you talking about? Jalen took another step forward. Your Honor, if the court permits, I'd like to submit a request to verify Officer Ruiz's GPS logs from that night. If his report claims he witnessed me in the vehicle, then his location history should corroborate it. But he let the word hang in the air, loaded with implication. I have a feeling it won't. Now the murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Grayson frowned, glancing at Carrington. Counselor Carrington cleared his throat, his jaw tightening. That report was filed by an officer of the law, Your Honor. Are we truly going to take the word of a defendant over a trained professional? Jalen gave a small, almost casual shrug. If the officer was where he claimed to be, then the GPS data will prove it. But if he wasn't? He let the sentence trail off, allowing the implication to sink in. Grayson studied him for a long moment, then turned to Carrington. Does the prosecution have any issue with verifying the officer's GPS logs? Carrington hesitated. The pause was just long enough. The jury noticed. The gallery noticed. And most critically, the judge noticed. Jalen took a quiet breath. He had spent years observing trials, studying prosecutors, their strategies, their manipulation of the system. One thing he knew for certain. If Carrington was truly confident in his case, he wouldn't be stalling. Grayson sighed, rubbing his temple. Counselor Carrington, he finally said, no objections, Your Honor. But the shift had already occurred. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't laughing. The courtroom was silent, but the tension was palpable. Unraveling the fingerprints, Carrington shuffled his papers, his polished confidence visibly cracking. Your Honor, while we await the GPS records, the fact remains that the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle. Jalen gave a small nod, his face unreadable. That's true. He took a step forward. But let's discuss that evidence for a moment. Grayson raised an eyebrow, gesturing for him to continue. Jalen turned to the jury, making eye contact with each member. The prosecution wants you to believe that finding my fingerprints in a car means I stole it. That's the narrative they're pushing. But let's consider this logically. He took a deep breath, his tone calm and controlled. Imagine you walk into a department store and try on a jacket. You put your hands in the pockets, perhaps zip it up, then place it back on the rack and leave. A few hours later, someone shoplifts that jacket. Would the presence of your fingerprints on it automatically mean you stole it? A few jurors exchanged glances. Someone in the gallery muttered under their breath. Jalen didn't give them time to recover. The car in question was parked outside a 7-Eleven hours before the alleged theft. I was inside that store with 3 friends, and yes, as we walked past the car, I leaned against it. I even opened the door because it was already unlocked. I didn't think much of it, didn't take the car, didn't drive it, didn't steal anything from inside. Just a moment of foolish curiosity. He let that sink in for a second, then in a voice that cut through the silence like a scalpel, he asked, does merely touching something make you a criminal? Carrington cleared his throat, frantically flipping through his notes, desperately searching for anything to regain control. Jalen wasn't finished. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about how that fingerprint analysis was conducted. He turned to Grayson. Your Honor, was the forensic specialist from this case subpoenaed to testify? Grayson blinked, caught off guard by the question. He glanced at Carrington. The The prosecutor hesitated, then reluctantly stated, "No." Jalen's lips pressed together. "So, let me be clear. The state is using forensic evidence to try and convict me, but they didn't deem it necessary to bring in the actual specialist who processed that evidence? No chance for me to cross-examine, inquire about the chain of custody, or challenge the accuracy of the analysis." Carrington's jaw tightened. Jalen nodded as if that was all the confirmation he needed. "Interesting." Judge Grayson sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. It was the look of a man realizing this case was far from the easy win he had assumed. But Jalen wasn't done yet. The next thing he was about to say would change everything. The truth revealed. Jalen took a slow step forward, his voice steady but firm. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence an official statement from the owner of the vehicle." Judge Grayson frowned. "The owner?" Jalen nodded. "Yes, Mr. Raymond Whitaker, the registered owner of the stolen Audi, provided a statement to the police that for some reason was never submitted in the prosecution's filings. And I think I know why." He turned to Carrington. "Do you recall what Mr. Whitaker told officers the night his car was reported stolen?" Carrington's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what was coming. Jalen didn't wait for him to answer. Instead, he pulled out a printed transcript from his file and read aloud, "I left my car running when I ran inside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off. But it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid and he was white." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Jalen held the paper up. "That's from the original police report, the same report the prosecution conveniently never mentioned." He turned back to Judge Grayson. "The arresting officer admitted this in his testimony. The prosecution ignored it. And yet they want this jury to believe that I, someone who doesn't even match the description of the real thief, am guilty beyond a reasonable doubt." Carrington stepped forward, scrambling. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was caught in possession of the vehicle." But Jalen shook his head. "No, I wasn't." His voice didn't rise, but it cut through the courtroom with sharp precision. "I was arrested blocks away from where the vehicle was abandoned, walking home after getting snacks with my friends. I wasn't in the car. I wasn't near the car. I wasn't running from anything. The only thing tying me to this case is bad police work and assumptions." Judge Grayson let out a slow breath, rubbing his temple. The case was unraveling fast and everyone knew it. Jalen turned back to the jury. "The real suspect got away that night. The officers found a black kid in the same general area and decided that was close enough. That's what this case is really about." Silence. Grayson cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Does the prosecution have anything further?" Carrington was stiff, his face flushed. "No, Your Honor." "Case dismissed." Judge Grayson exhaled. He looked at Jalen for a long time, then glanced at the jury. Finally, he leaned forward and spoke the words that would resonate with everyone in that room. "Case dismissed." A beat of stunned silence, then chaos. Half the courtroom erupted. Some in disbelief, some in quiet relief. The gallery stirred, reporters scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Jalen didn't move right away. He let the moment settle, let the reality sink in for everyone. Judge Grayson, still gripping his gavel, looked at Jalen with an unreadable expression. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Recognition, perhaps even regret. Jalen met his gaze, then turned to leave. But just as he reached the door, the judge spoke again. "Mr. Dawson." Jalen stopped but didn't turn. Grayson hesitated, then finally said, "You should consider law school." Jalen smirked. He didn't need to consider it. He was already on his way. Beyond the verdict, outside the courthouse, the air hummed with voices. Reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Jalen, did you know the judge would dismiss the case? What are you going to do next? How does it feel to outmaneuver a seasoned prosecutor?" Jalen pulled his hoodie over his head, ignoring the questions. He wasn't interested in the spectacle. This wasn't about proving how smart he was. It was about something far bigger. His mother, Denise, was waiting for him at the bottom of the steps, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. For a long moment she just looked at him, then finally she shook her head and let out a breath. "Boy, you scared me half to death." Jalen chuckled, scratching the back of his head. "Had to take a risk, Ma." She stared at him for a second longer, then pulled him into a tight hug. "You always were the stubborn one." The cameras kept flashing, but Jalen wasn't paying attention to them anymore. Across the street, standing by his car, Judge Grayson watched. His posture was different now. The arrogance was gone. His expression wasn't amused anymore. It was something else, closer to reflection. He hadn't expected this case to be anything more than routine. Just another day, another defendant, another guilty plea. But now he knew he'd remember this one. Because Jalen had done something most people never could. He made the system look at itself, and for once it blinked first. Here's the crucial lesson we should all take from this. How many other cases had unfolded in a similar way? How many individuals had been convicted, not because of irrefutable evidence, but because of underlying bias, procedural shortcuts, and a system that prioritized closing cases over discovering the truth? Jalen possessed the knowledge to fight back, but what about those who didn't? This wasn't just about one case, it was about all of them. He knew what he had to do next. This courtroom wouldn't be the last one he stood in, but next time he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the attorney. And when that day came, he wouldn't be the only one. If this story made you pause and reflect even for a second, then share it. The justice system is built on laws, but it's run by people, and people can change, but only if we compel them to. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that matter, and let's keep this vital conversation going. Because next time it might not be Jalen. It might be someone you know.